Hello, welcome to the Breck Buzz. Show is going to tell you all about what's been happening for the last month in the town of Breckenridge town government. I got two wonderful guests with me today. They're going to help me out to fill you in what's been going on. Councilmember Gary Gallagher on my right and Councilmember Ben Brewer on my left. Thank you for both being here.
Thanks for having us.
Joining me.
Thank you, Tim.
It's almost like a dawning of a new day.
It is.
Election time. Well, we just went through it, and we had a lot of candidates. What's your impression? Ben, you want to kick her off a little bit?
Well, absolutely. My first impression is that I was impressed with the turnout. We had over 1,000 people vote in our municipal election, which was a large number. And so I'm very encouraged about that. I think it's great to see so many people caring about our town and the future direction of our town. So that was my first impression. The second impression was that I believe that the selections that the voters made were excellent ones, and we've got two new council members and a returning one in Mark Breck, and the two new ones, Elizabeth Lawrence
right.
And Aaron Giello.
Good,
these
you
are
got the
two,
name down already.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah. Aaron Giello. These are two up and coming, incredibly well connected, very enthusiastic, very energetic, smart women, and so I can't wait to dig into some issues and see how the new council approaches some problem solving. So, I think the voters, did a great job. I mean, they've spoken, and now it's time to get on with some business. And hopefully we can be really productive and be a good working, functional council like we have been, I think, the past 2 years.
A lot of activity, a lot of enthusiasm in this election, it seemed like. Compared to maybe when you ran, Gary?
Well, Ben and I ran 2 years ago. There were 5 candidates for 3 seats at that time. This time we found there were 8 candidates going for 3 seats, and I think once again it just shows that people are prepared to step up in the town of Breckenridge and serve, whether it's on council or our commissions and committees. We always have a tremendous amount of very, very highly qualified people that want to give back to their community. I think in this case, in addition to what Ben said, I think we've got 2 young, attractive, and very intelligent women coming on town council.
As opposed to us old, ugly guys.
And as opposed to what we might have had before, but again, knowing both Aaron and Elizabeth, and of course Mark returning, I think what that does is it continues to maintain the civil and respectful nature of the dialogue and the discourse on council as we discuss, debate, and argue the issues. And so I think it's again, we've got a good 7 folks that come from different points of view, different backgrounds, and it will be great because we'll always end up with some pretty good decision making when you've got that kind of a variety on your breadth and depth.
Just a little unusual that neither of the new candidates have had any service in local government before. First run at any type of committee, commissions, or anything else like that.
Right. Well, I don't think anybody questioned the qualifications. I mean, Elizabeth Lawrence works for the Summit Foundation, so she's very connected with all of our nonprofits, which I think is a very important connection to make. And she's been involved in different ways. She's been on child care committees, and in fact, we appointed her to the new child care task force. So she's been very involved for a long time. Aaron Giello has served on the BRC board, and she is also very connected to our small businesses because she runs TV8. So she knows a lot of the advertisers and a lot of the small businesses. She has those connections. So I think those 2 things, while they may not have held public office in the past, they're both, they've both been involved for a long time, and their different networks and connections will definitely help us understand, our town better. And I think that's a really strong a strong thing for our future.
Good. Let's talk a little about a little controversy that we had during this past month. Maybe a very positive controversy at the end of the day. Gary, you sit on the Art Commission, and we had the big roundabout discussion.
Yes.
Maybe you want to fill the public in a little bit about what happened and maybe the setup for the process that we went through.
Good. Yeah, just kind of sharing a little background. The roundabout that's located as we come into town, pretty much to date has been, I call it some haphazard landscaping. We've had a lot of comments from our citizens in terms of, gee, that's not terribly welcoming. That's not really what Breck's all about. We should really step it up so that as you are, not only are you being welcomed to town, but you're being welcomed in a sense of like, wow, I mean, this is pretty significant. This is pretty attractive to go with everything else that we have in Breckenridge, because I think we always do things top shelf in the town of Breckenridge. So, make a long story short, over the last couple of years, there's been discussions regarding what do we want to have in that roundabout to welcome our folks to town. And decision was made probably a year or so ago to do a sculpture. And one of the reasons for a sculpture was because Breckenridge has a very large collection of public art throughout the town. It's very proud of its art, and one of the goals going forward in making Breckenridge a year-round premier cultural arts destination, not only are we building out the arts district and going to do a renovation to the backstage theater, but we also want to continue to increase our public arts collection. So we said, wow, this really fits with our longer term strategy and goal for the town. And so our Public Arts Commission did a call to artists, which is very traditional in the industry, and over 200 sculptors responded to that call. And so the Public Arts Commission basically whittled it down from over 200 to 4. Not only based upon their submissions and application, but also looking at their portfolios. And the thought was at the time that we wanted a recognizable piece of art, something that when you looked at, you really understood what it was. And so the whole process was gone through. There was public input, both at our rec center where they actually could see the maquettes, as well as on Engage Breckenridge, where they could look at the pictures and comment online, and several articles ran in the Summit Daily News. So there was a real good opportunity to get public input. And at the end of the day, the 4 finalists, when they submitted their proposals, there was a lot of comment. There was a lot of comment from the public that the public wasn't terribly strongly in favor of any one of the pieces, quite frankly. And they were all very different. I think what we ended up with was not what we were sensing we were going to end up with in terms of an easily recognizable piece, because that roundabout's a difficult spot. You're coming through it at 15 or 20 miles an hour. If you do something too complicated and too detailed, there's no way somebody in a car is going to see it anyway. And so we ended up with several pieces, and council, make a long story short, council decided they didn't feel that any one of the 4 pieces was appropriate for the roundabout. Although there was one piece by a sculptor, a very well-known sculptor by the name of Albert Paley, who is nationally and internationally renowned, who had done sort of an abstract piece, something for which he is very well known. And the council felt that that would be a strategic acquisition as part of our public art collection, but not in the roundabout location. And the thought would be somewhere more in the center of town, more likely than not, it's going to be in the Riverwalk Center area to basically, fill out the Riverwalk Center on the lawn and everything that might be going on there in the future. And so we really ended up going back to ground zero, going, gee, what is it that would be appropriate for the roundabout? And so the Public Arts Commission went back to the drawing table, and they heard that the council, if we were going to do a recognizable piece, it had to be something that was going to be much simpler, without a lot of detail, because it would just be wasted. You get a terrific piece of art, you're going to really want to be able to get up close to it, you're going to want to study it, you're going to probably want to feel it, the kids certainly will, and you're really going to want to understand it. And we realized in the roundabout that just wasn't likely possible with an intricate piece of recognizable art. So the Public Arts Commission basically came back to Town Council a week ago and said, we've got three themes for you. Which ones do you kind of react more strongly toward? One is recognizable, but we'd have to do it on a much simpler plane, if you will. Another would be environmental art, which is where you really use natural materials and complement that within the landscaping that's going to be done in the roundabout. The landscaping is going to be very high end anyway. And so the question is some sort of environmental art perhaps. And then there was another concept thrown out which was called environmental graphics. And I never really knew at the time what that meant, but I'm told what it is. It's sort of like artful signage, but it's not just a plain old sign. It's something that's obviously got a lot of detail to it, can still be terribly exciting when people see it and react to it. And I think the council basically kind of reacted, the majority anyway, we're saying, well, maybe we're more in the family of environmental art or environmental graphics. The recognizable, we're not so sure, again, because it may not be the right place for it. And so the Public Arts Commission has gone back with that kind of input, although I think it's still very broad input. Mm-hmm. And I was at a meeting of the Public Arts Commission yesterday, and they're trying to catch their breath. When we turned down their recommendation and said that none of the four really suited the roundabout, that really took the air out of their sails. And so they're going to look at this obviously carefully, but they're not going to be in a rush. And we said to them, don't be in a rush. We really want you to come back with some options for us, and let's get some reaction. So as a result of yesterday's meeting, one of the things they will be doing over the course of the next several months is coming up with maybe 3, 4, 5 options to come back to council with and get a sense of whether the council feels any one of those particular options makes sense. And if for some reason council shrugs their shoulders and goes, no, we still don't think you've got it, there's a thought that we just may end up doing landscaping. Just end up at the end of the day, we'll just do some absolutely, top of the art, landscaping. I think a lot of us feel that the landscaping will work nicely in the summer because you have the flowers and the color, and in the winter because you can put all the lights and can be very, very festive. But the concern is, what do you do in the shoulder seasons if it's just landscaping? When you lose your color and things of that nature, we'd really have to come up with a good alternative, because one of the things we're trying to do in this town is obviously market in our shoulder seasons, so that we still want people coming in the fall, we want people coming in the late spring, early summer, and as they come into town, we still want them to go, wow, this is pretty neat, this is outstanding. So we've got a ways to go. Like I said, bottom line is they'll come back to us with several alternatives. If none of them just get traction with the council, then perhaps we'll have to go back to looking real hard at landscaping, but in a way where the landscaping would be very inviting and exciting and make a statement that you've now really come into the town of Breckenridge for all seasons, not just the summer and the winter, for which it's easy to do. So some challenges ahead, Tim.
Connection between location and a nice piece of art seems to be very interesting, huh?
Well, I think I think what we decided was we actually loved one of the pieces of art. It was an Albert Paley sculpture, and so we decided to buy it. And it's going to go, I think, probably on the Riverwalk lawn. And in the end, I think what we decided is we wouldn't want to do that to a piece of art. In other words, put it on the roundabout where it's going to get sloshed with slush and dirt, and have a little maybe more respect for the art, and put it in a place that's more fitting to a sculpture of that scale and that beauty, so that people can approach it and experience it. I think we were trying to dress up the roundabout, and none of us really gave a lot of thought ahead of time to what that would mean for traffic and just that location. I mean, the location maybe isn't best suited for a sculpture or a really iconic piece of art. Maybe it's better suited for some sort of signage or just landscaping. I think in the end we're going to end up with something beautiful because everybody's working really hard on it.
Probably worthy of note that none of our other art pieces are in that type of a location. They're all on property, away from traffic, away from those type of things. So it's an interesting process, and as we always say, art is very subjective.
Very subjective, very personal,
Oh, yeah.
and you're not going to make everybody happy regardless of the piece that you
never
end
will.
up with.
Yeah, never will.
Continuing a little bit on the, I won't call it real controversial, but we have had some feedback relative to our community center, which was recently named the Breckenridge Grand Vacations Community Center. And Ben, maybe you want to give the background to the public about why the fundraising committee and then ultimately the council went in that direction.
I'd be happy to. I think looking back on the process, it appears like it's one decision by one group of people, and in fact it was an evolution of many different decisions by a whole slew of different groups and a whole bunch of different people. So I think that the fact is we're ending up with a completely renovated 1909 building, one of our architectural treasures, and it's going to be, it'll have the library in it, and it'll have 3 nonprofits, and we were able to maintain the Speakeasy movie theater, as well as put a coffee shop in there and a big community room. And I think that when people walk into the building, they'll understand the importance and the beauty that it represents for our town. Now, how we got there is sometimes we refer to the process as sausage making, because everybody likes the result, but you don't necessarily want to see the process that went into making it. So the sausage making in this case involved, it's a joint project with the town and the county and the BHA and a county library system. And so there were representatives from all those different groups, as well as community members and all kinds of people involved in the fundraising committee for the library. And it was a very complicated process that took, that spanned 9 months or about a year, actually. We started about a year ago. And it's been an incredibly successful process. We've raised, I think, to date, I think I can say this, about $1.9 million towards the library. And that's very important, because that's $1.9 million that the county didn't have to spend and the town didn't have to spend. And it's also $1.9 million worth of community investment and sweat equity that the community has in the project. I think that's all very important. So going back, I'll touch on a couple points. One is that the first decision that we made, and not we, the town council, but we, all of those groups, because we were being fed with decisions that had, in some cases, already been decided by the other entities. So the county would make a decision, they'd send it to us, we would decide on that. And in general, we wanted it to be a cooperative, successful fundraising project. So when we had a decision in front of us that had already been made by the county, we want to keep the process going along, and so in general we were very accommodating, and we wanted to facilitate fundraising. So we said yes to naming the building. We said yes to naming the theater. We said yes to naming different things within the building, just to make sure that we were able to raise enough money. So one of the big things that won't be named within the building is the library itself. So the library committee had certain parameters they were working with, and they decided, and the county, that they didn't want the library within the building to be named. And so that made it much more important for us to actually name the building, because that's one of the biggest things that you can raise money by doing is naming the building. So a few other decisions that I think the fundraising committee made early on were that we weren't going to issue an RFP. Otherwise, we might have ended up with the Coca-Cola, building, or the Coors building, or something like that. And we didn't really want that, so we didn't issue an RFP. and I think that was important. Another thing that happened was in the fundraisers who were working on it were working very hard with foundations and different groups, and many of the foundations require community participation in a project of this sort before they will throw their hand in. So, in other words, we've won grants to date from Climax, El Pomar, DOLA, which is the Department of Local Affairs. That was a $400,000 grant, a really big one. Climax was $100,000. And then a bunch of other organizations and grants. I think the Betcher Foundation provided a grant. And all of them require a certain level of community participation. And so naming the building became very important because it became the vehicle by which we gained the public participation in the process. And therefore we were able to get all this other money and all these other grants for the project. So it was a long process, and it resulted in, the fundraising committee first approached individuals, and individuals who were qualified to name the building had ample opportunity to do so. It's just an awful lot of money. And so next, different individuals were approached, and finally Grand Lodge stepped up, and they stepped up huge. They gave $500,000 to the project, and in return they were able to secure the naming rights for the building, and that is what set in motion all the other things, all the other grants that we were able to get. And in total, we've raised $1.9 million, so it was a very successful fundraising effort. Now, am I gonna say, to Jacob, hey, meet me at the Grand Lodge at Peak 7 library later so that we can, read some books or something like that? The how we all refer to the building is up to us. I think it's important for everybody to understand that the Grand Lodge at Peak 7 Community Center will be the official name, and it'll be on all the official paperwork and everything like that. There will be a plaque in the building, or some signage to, commemorate it that way. And I think it's great because here we've got a local company. All the ownership of that company is local. These are 3 local families that have built a business out of nothing, employed hundreds of people in our community, and they have stepped up to name the building. Now, to me, it's a no-brainer. Yes, of course. We're going to accept that money. It's going to help make the project successful, and I guess that's all I have to say about it. I mean, I was skeptical. I was reluctant. But the more I learned about it, of course, the more enthusiastic I became. Yeah. And if you think about it, $500,000 is a lot of money. That's a lot of sales tax revenue. That's a lot of, marijuana sales revenue. That's a lot of property tax revenue that we don't have to earn.
If I may just add something to what Ben was saying, is that, it's not as though Breck Grand Vacations just showed up having never done anything else in our community, and all of a sudden say, gee, for our egos now, we want to have Breck Grand Vacations on this building, and so we'll pay you $500,000 and so on and so forth. When you really strip away, peel the onion here, the Millheisers and the Dudicks for years have been very, very generous contributors, not only to the town of Breckenridge, but throughout Summit County. So these aren't Johnny-come-latelys. These are guys that have taken their profits and that the community has been good to them, and they have turned around and put it back into the community. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, when you want somebody to prime the pump and be the leverage for these foundations to get these larger grants, there couldn't be a better, in my opinion, a better local sponsor for this property than that group, who has just done so much over the years for this community and for this county.
Right.
So.
And I think I just thought of another thing. The climate in which we made the decision was a whole lot different than it is today. If you recall, we had a lot of local opposition to the project in general, and one of the ways that we got that deal done was that we put in the fundraising component to it. In other words, there wasn't the political will to actually spend all of that money, and so the way we got the deal done was to add in the fundraising. And it's important to realize that, because everybody has pretty short memory when you think about it. There was opposition. It was a lot of money. We weren't sure, if it was going to happen. The fact is, we got it done, and that's the important thing. Our community, our town now has this architectural gem that will serve as a community center, and it's going to be amazing. And so I hope everybody will reserve judgment until they're able to step into the building and see what the end result is and enjoy it, because it's going to be spectacular.
Good. So that's how it came about. Now we know. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk about a few other things the council's been working on. Hello, welcome back to Breck Buzz. This is part 2, and talking about a few of the things that have been occurring over the last month in the town of Breckenridge. And lately, the council's been dealing with a few planning type issues. Not unusual. We kind of revisit our code periodically, but some of these are fairly significant. One of the big ones is condo hotels. And condo hotels were a product of an earlier generation where we were trying to encourage hotbeds in the community, and things have changed since then. So the council is dealing with how that change has occurred and what should we be doing next. Gary, we have a little background to that, and maybe where the council might be thinking about heading.
Regarding the condo hotels, the council has looked at 2 aspects of the condo hotels. One is those that currently exist, and those that have yet to be built but will be built as we go forward. The history of this is, as Tim was saying, years ago, developers would come to the town and say, we're prepared to build a condo hotel. The town said, that'd be terrific. The idea of hotbeds, getting people here, turning the rooms over, so on and so forth. But one of the things that the developers have said historically, and will currently say today, is that in order to really be able to market these kind of units, you really need to have a nice amenities package. And historically, you needed a front desk, you maybe needed some concierge, you needed a lobby, you might need some meeting rooms, and some other amenities in order to really make the facility, very, very attractive from a sales point of view. What happened over the years, and the town went out and did some investigating over the last year, was that the market has changed. People don't necessarily need a front desk any longer. When they book their rooms, they can book them online. They can pick up their key anywhere and get into the unit. So what was happening was that a lot of the space that the developer had been given was called a density bonus multiplier for the condo hotels. As everyone knows, in real estate, density has value, and you pay for your density when you're doing any sort of a real estate development. But in order to incentivize condo hotels, i.e. in the hotbeds, what was embedded in the code, the development code for the town, was that the town would give bonus density to the developer, provided he did the front desk, the lobby, the concierge, some meeting rooms, maybe a media room, things of this nature. A real nice amenities package. And over the years, what's happened is that many of the older condo hotels basically have abandoned those uses and have wanted to do some other things with that square footage, for which they did not pay anything for that additional density, because it was a given in order to make the project more attractive. So the council, with respect to historical properties, has said, okay, that horse has left the barn. However, if you are going to not use that space for its originally intended purpose, then we'd like to see it become deed restricted rental. And if you're prepared to do that, then we will let you out of your obligation to maintain this, call it bonus density for your amenities package. And so that's how we are addressing, let's call it the historical condo hotels. Going forward, for new applications or submissions and for new development, rather than find ourselves in that situation once again, the council has decided to create a covenant that will run with the property or run with the land, such that we're not looking to reduce the bonus multiplier for these condo hotels. We still think that they provide a valuable asset for the town. But what we're saying is that what you think today, the amenity package that you're going to need in order to market your property successfully, this density bonus multiplier, which can add 200, 300, 400% more density in terms of your amenities package. If in the future you're not using it for those originally intended uses, then we are going to come to you and you're going to write us a check for the value of that density that you were given for which you did not pay, because you are now deciding to use it for a different use. And those checks could be quite sizable. The way it's done, Tim and Ben, as we all know, is something called TDRs. And TDRs are equivalent to so much square footage. So if somebody had 1,000 square feet or something that they were going to do a lot of amenities for, and we said, fine, we're not going to charge you for that 1,000 square feet. And then in the future, some portion of that 1,000 square feet, as an example, they're saying, we really don't need it anymore. The market's changed. We want to do something else with it. We're going to say, fine. We're going to say, that's equivalent to a full TDR or a partial TDR. And in the bank today, the TDR goes for almost $50,000. Mm-hmm. So you never know. This could be a check for $25,000, $50,000, $100,000. We don't know in the future. But the point is that we are going to have that covenant that runs with the land. So no matter who the owner is, even when the ownership gets passed on, there will be that obligation in the deed that will run with the deed, so everybody will know. And if they want to make a change, then they will have to be writing a check. It will no longer be density for which they paid nothing initially and still not have to pay something later on if they change the intended use. So I think we've kind of hopefully closed the barn doors.
So the existing is a public benefit exchange, so it has to benefit the overall public. The second is a monetary change, if it's a new one, that they don't follow through to keep it fair with what other people have to do.
Right, which I think is fair. A lot of condo hotels were built over the years because the town was trying to incentivize, as you said, hot beds. Now we have lots of hot beds, and it just doesn't seem likely that we'll have a lot of more condo hotels coming down. But it's possible, and you never know what the market will be next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. But I think it's a good thing to put on the books.
Good. Another one, Ben, that the council talked about, this is kind of most people probably don't even know the vernacular, but we call it historic connectors. What is that all about?
Okay. Well, it's a good question. Okay, so in the historic district, and so we're talking about just the core of Breckenridge where the historic district is, typically you had a house and some other structure. In some cases it was an outhouse, typically it was a barn, and that structure was usually smaller in scale to the big house. And so our building code includes a provision by which you can connect a larger structure to the traditional smaller structure, usually behind it. And as our historic district has evolved, we've had to adapt and create ways for new structures to sort of follow that pattern, and so that it all more or less still looks like the historic structure, even though we've got new buildings in it. So a connector just is just that. It connects the larger mass structure to the smaller mass structure, just in general. The thing is, of late, we've had some connectors that are just as big as the structures themselves, or that are 2 stories high. And when you follow the letter of the code, you can create all kinds of stuff, and that's one of the many things that has been happening. And so we've been seeking to address it. And so we've addressed it with what we think is maybe an imperfect formula that we'd like to try out and see if it results in a better result down the road. But it's not fatally flawed. It's better than what we have now. We're just not sure exactly what the result will be. So we're going to try it and see if we can get the mass of those connectors down to scale, so that they really are connectors and not actual living space between the two buildings.
Those things typically happen with a remodel of an historic building and a new addition. Is that how it usually is working, Gary?
That's what we have seen.
Right.
And I think a recent project really brought this to light for the Planning Commission and for senior staff. And as Ben was saying, that you've got these 2 buildings now, and you wish to connect them, and we were seeing sometimes they were being connected by a 2-story connector. And in that connector, it wasn't just for passage. It was, they might have been putting a bedroom in, they might have been putting a library in, they might have put bathrooms in. And at the end of the day, what you were seeing was new building masses that were creeping up in size, and the concern was overwhelming the small scale nature and character of our historic district. So as Ben was sharing with everyone, the idea was the connectors will be a 1 story, and they will also have to be somewhat lower than the ridge lines of the 2 buildings to which they are connecting. And I think it was the mayor who said, well, this may well address about 95% of the situations, and there may be some that does not get addressed, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. And if we have to do some tinkering and some adjustments, we'll deal with it as we see some specific examples hit the table that aren't working quite the way we want them to work in the historic district. And I think the theory and the philosophy is anybody who's purchasing land in the historic district for purposes of building let's call it a newer structure, more modern and so on and so forth, we're expecting that they appreciate what the historic district is, and that they have knowledge of that when they come in, to realize they just can't put something humongous in the neighborhood when you have properties on either side of the neighborhood on a much smaller scale. So we're just trying to not necessarily take away someone's private property rights, but we're saying, gee, you're in the historic district, why are you here? You're in the historic district because you appreciate the historic district, so be a good neighbor and develop what it is that you're going to develop with that in mind. And I think that's really where we tried to come from.
Striking the balance between context and livability. And making it a little easier. The connectors were originally intended to make it a little easier to do some fixers-uppers in the historic district.
Right,
Yeah.
so you can go to your outhouse, without putting on your moccasins, or your galoshes, I guess.
The continual
Sorels,
evolution.
as it were.
I'm sure this will not be the last time we hear about this one.
Right.
Things have a tendency to come around and around, don't they?
Well, we all have the same goal, and that is to have a historic district that's beautiful and still maintains its historic nature.
Yep.
Simple as that.
Yep.
Pretty special in Breckenridge. That's why a lot of people come
Why
here.
we're here.
Let's talk about 2 projects. I know it's a little hard without pictures to describe these to folks, but we want to let people know that 2 projects that the council has kind of given the nod to. One is our now called the North Main Street Park. We haven't named it yet. And secondly, the Old Masonic Hall, which we have named. Kind of give a little bit of where the council's at on those and what the people will see this summer as a part of our construction season.
Okay. Let's start with the North Main Street Park. That was a piece of property that the town acquired approximately a year ago. It's on the corner of Wellington and Main Street. And the thought that council had at the time was, rather than just see continuing developing along our Main Street, wouldn't it be nice to have some pocket parks where people could get off the Main Street, get off the sidewalk, and just sort of enjoy. and sort of a comfortable, more quieter environment. And we heard a lot from the retailers and the business owners on the north end of town who felt that this would really be something great for their businesses. They're finding now that more people are moving into the north end of town, more businesses are starting, but in terms of trying to really create an overall positive ambiance, they were very, very supportive of the town's acquisition and what we would be doing with the park. The park also received a lot of public input, a tremendous amount of public input, and we asked people, what would you like to see there? And we had all kinds of suggestions. And at the end of the day, when you removed, I'll call them the outliers, some of the things that just weren't going to happen, and also taking a look at things from the point of view of cost. We have ended up with a program and a design which was presented to Council this past Tuesday, which Council signed off on. Very excited about. And we're going to have an area that's going to have a gathering plaza where you can host some events and performances. There'll be an active recreation area for the children to kind of climb on some, I'll call it some environmental art. Could be boulders, could be wood structures, things of this nature. There will be a walkway, and along that walkway will be public art. There will also be some picnic tables and benches so that if people just want to kind of sit down and have a sort of a passive vista looking up at the 10-mile mountain range, they can do so over a sandwich or a soft drink or something while the children are playing. And we also thought it was very important to connect that park to the Edward Carter Museum, sort of up on the hill, because right now it kind of sits by itself. I mean, we locals know it's there, a lot of our visitors know it's there, but it doesn't really seem to be part of anything. So we really wanted to take the opportunity and kind of connect the current Edward Carter Museum with this North Main Street Park. And so that will be occurring as well. And I think the interesting thing to note is that this park will be receiving from a development agreement deal that the town has entered into with a particular developer, $37,000. We are deferring some planned investment fees, which are fees you usually pay at the front end of a project, but this project that's going to be the timeshare at the base of Peak 8 will be done in phases. So we're allowing the developer, which we've done in other developer situations, to defer their planned investment fees over a period of time, in return for which there's a formula that gets worked out. When they pay those planned investment fees, it is at the then future price. We're not letting somebody defer into the future based upon a price today, but rather it'll be the price then. But in return, we're getting a little over $37,000. And the council and the developer have agreed that this money will be used toward public art, and specifically in the North Main Street Park. Got a long name there.
Work on that name.
We got to work on that name, okay. But I think that sets a great example, because one of the things the Public Arts Commission has talked about is, as we do things with different developments in real estate, there are often times when the developers need a variance, or they need an exception, or they need something that the town council feels is still in the public interest. And to tie that in perhaps to a contribution that we could use specifically to support our public art. And I think this is a good example of starting here, and perhaps there may well be other opportunities in the future to obtain some monies along those lines and direct it specifically to public art, because in the past the town has had to take money out of its general funds every year to make monies available so that the Public Arts Commission could continue purchasing and gathering public art to, again, put this town on the map in terms of a very positive arts destination for guests who don't come just for skiing or fishing or golfing.
Ben, you want to take a crack at the old Masonic Hall? Where's that all happening now?
Yeah, so the old Masonic Hall, it is...
And that one has its name.
Yeah,
that one. We have a name for that one.
I guess the planners have been calling it Old Masonic Hall, and we all kind of like that name. So
that's the one that goes back, and it was one of the original names that they could figure out back in those early, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I guess.
Yeah, so it does make a lot of sense, and the Masons Lodge was there for years and years and years, and they were a big force in Breckenridge all through history, going back to the early 1900s.
Sure,
so
part of the courthouse. And,
they built
exactly.
they built the Grand Lodge. They built that building, and they built the courthouse, and but more than that, they were a very influential force.
They go back to the beginning of this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you see them on the dollar bill, their symbols. I mean, yeah, they're.
And so we bought the building. It's at the corner of Main Street and Washington, and so it's a very recognizable historic building in Breckenridge. It's the one that's white, and it has that big flat white front to it. We really felt that the town really should own that building because it sits right between the Riverwalk Center, the Riverwalk Plaza, and the Arts District. And so it's just perfectly positioned to sort of be the entree for people to discover the Arts District. And also just in general get people from Main Street up into the nether reaches of Breckenridge, which would be the up to Harris Street, up to High Street, and experience some of our architecture and some of our some of the other areas of Breckenridge in the core, our historic district. So we bought the building, and then we looked at what we should do with it, and I think we were all unanimous that it should be part of the Arts District, or at least portions of the building should, because it's right there. And also, we looked at different levels of renovation for that building. We looked at levels, that were just basically superficial and minimal, all the way up to sort of the full historic restoration that it really requires. And of course, we jumped at that option. It was the most expensive one, but when you look at the plan, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's going to be so functional and such a no-brainer for our town that we were all unanimous in choosing the most expensive option, which includes a structural renovation for the foundation, a new roof, lots of basically taking the building and putting it back to the way it was when it was built. So, the windows on the front of Main Street will, be restored. And I think the Masons needed their privacy, so they kind of shrunk. They shrunk those windows, and so those windows will be restored, and that will, live again as another architectural icon of Breckenridge. I mean, it'll be really something special. We don't really know exactly how we're going to program every part of the building, but I envision something, for the frontage on Main Street to be something very welcoming so that guests can discover the Arts District and other things about Breckenridge just by walking in there. And so I couldn't be more thrilled. I think it's an incredible project. It's an amazing building, and the renovation and the plans look just awesome.
Well, it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and we're talking about a $2 million stabilization, restoration, and rehabilitation to turn it into a multi-purpose arts facility that will host events and performances. It will have classes and workshops, artist studios, some administrative offices. I mean, and it ties right in, as Ben was saying, to the Arts District. It's also going to have a kitchen facility, so that kitchen facility can support other programs or events that might be occurring in the Arts District themselves, because the Arts District buildings that we are renovating and restoring do not have any sort of kitchen facilities. So the thought was have an upgraded kitchen facility here in the old Masonic Hall, and it really will support the entire Arts District. And as Ben said, it's going to look absolutely beautiful, tie very nicely into all the other buildings we're doing in the Arts District, and be a gateway, depending upon are you heading west to the to the Riverwalk Center, or you're heading east from the Riverwalk Center back through the Blue River Plaza up into the Arts District. So,
and all the way up to the community center, which is on the same street.
it was truly a strategic acquisition. And for our viewers, they should know that Ben's the one who made it happen. He was the one that had the vision and actually made the deal and made it happen.
The relationships are important.
Thanks for mentioning that. It really was all of us. You know, it wasn't just one person. It takes 7 people on council to do anything. You know, I suggested it, and
you're being very humble, but it wouldn't have happened had you not been out front. So.
Well, I can't wait to see the renovation.
So this summer we will see construction for both those projects. The Main Street Park is going to be going out to bid shortly, as is the final design is being completed on our old Masonic Hall.
So the park should be available this year.
This year, that's definitely.
And the old Masonic Hall will be the September 2015,
Yeah,
I
they're
believe.
figuring at least
A year after the
15-month type of construction schedule, particularly with the foundation work and ADA accessibility, which we didn't mention, and so all those type of things are going to be important changes to that building to make it totally accessible to the public.
Super.
Great. Ben, another one that the council fine-tuned, I call it fine-tuning. We've had a long-term development agreement and a variety of planning approvals for the Wellington neighborhood. And it's now moving into kind of its last phases, but this was also some of the phases that required a little bit more in terms of AMI for the deed restriction. But there was also some desire on the developer to have a little bit more flexibility, so the housing committee worked on that and came out, it seems like, with a pretty good plan to really help the future buyers.
Yeah, I mean, you know, attainable housing or workforce housing is such a huge need in our community, and it's hard to find someone who doesn't feel that the Wellington neighborhood, you know, hasn't been successful. It basically is a new community. It houses our middle class, is what it does, or at least that's how I look at it. Or it contributes to that the housing of the middle class in Breckenridge. And we wouldn't have a middle class if people like me and my neighbors didn't have a place to live. So what we heard in our last meeting was the formulas that will be used to determine the affordability of the new phase of the Wellington neighborhood. So if you haven't heard about this yet, the Wellington neighborhood is currently all on the north side of French Creek. And what the developer is proposing is to build on the south side of French Creek. So there's a whole sort of block. It's phase 3 and filing 3 of the neighborhood. And so what we discussed was the formulas by which those housing units would be created in terms of affordability or attainability, which is, as we've learned, very difficult. I think the committee, when they created the present formula for you know, filing 1 and 2 in the Wellington neighborhood, did a great job, because they're still working pretty well to you know, create attainability in those neighborhoods. So you know, the committee just worked incredibly hard on it, and what we came up with, or what the committee came up with, was, I think, a formula that would probably take us, you know, into the next decade or so of you know, helping to keep those units affordable. So AMI is a moving target, and that stands for the average median income of a citizen or a family of 4 in Summit County. And so that's the benchmark that has classically been used to sort of create the formula. And I think what we know is that the lower income is of higher need in terms of attainability. In other words, it's much harder if you're at 80% of the AMI than it is for you to live and prosper in Breckenridge than it is if you're at 120% of AMI, and harder still at 60% of AMI. So, I don't have the formula in front of me, but what we're trying to do is target the lower income families and make the formula work for them in terms of, can they get financing to buy these units, and will it be affordable for them on a monthly basis? So one innovative thing that I can share is that instead of using a variable interest rate, we're actually fixing that interest rate, which we think will help.
Right, and help the long-term affordability plus the initial price going in.
Exactly, because I think, we all realize the goal on workforce housing is to make it affordable going in, is also to continue to keep it affordable so that when the original owner wants to sell or move on, either to another unit or perhaps their job takes them out of the area, that it continues to remain affordable for the next purchaser. And as Ben was saying, the two things that were adjusted, one was what they call the pricing formula. Today, they were using a rate like 4.3%, and the developer has agreed that we will assume that the interest rates are 6.5%. What that basically does, for somebody on whatever income level you may be, you could be 80% AMI or 100% AMI, by underwriting at 6.5%, it basically means that the price of the unit is less costly than if you underwrote at a 4.5% rate. So by doing that, not only have you made it more affordable going in, but over time, since you're starting at a lower base, hopefully it doesn't grow crazily and get way out of hand. And you've also increased your pool of buyers. Because you want the developer to be successful as well. You want him to sell out. We know that there's a demand here in the marketplace, so why not sell out these properties sooner rather than later? And then the other thing, that the adjustments that were made were on the income testing. Again, to increase the pool of buyers on the front end, as well as increasing the pool of buyers on the exit strategy for the original purchaser. The AMI levels were increased. Where it used to be for some units 80% AMI has now gone to 90, and where for some other units where it was 100% AMI, it's gone to be either 150 for duplex units or 180% AMI for about 15 single-family units, small single-family units, because one of the things that the developer, in discussing with the housing committee, and Lori Best, who is the senior town staffer on this, well, there was a lot of demand for people who really want their own single-family detached. And in order to do that, we needed to raise the income levels, the income testing, in order to make those particular units work. And it also gives a nicer mix to the community, provides some other options. And so those are the two things that were addressed, the pricing formula and the income testing. And in return for that, some of these units are going to receive some carports that otherwise they would not have received. So there were benefits going back and forth, both for I'll call it the public benefit as well as the developer benefit. And in the end, we're delighted, as Ben had said earlier, pegging that interest rate at a higher rate. We've just decreased the price of those units going in anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000.
Makes it a little easier to get in there.
Makes it a little easier to get in, makes it easier to stay, and when it's time to go, it makes it easier for the next buyer to come in and take you out so that you're not stuck. And so it really creates some good lubrication for the entire system.
Probably be a model for one of our future projects too. So, well, we've run out of time. I want to thank Ben and Gary for joining me today to fill you in on a lot of stuff that's been happening, and some fun, some less fun. And looking forward to the new council. We ought to, as a closing, thank two of our exiting council members for some great work, Mike Dudick and Jen McAtamney. I know the council did that publicly, but we also want to do that here on our, who have been regular guests also on our Breck Buzz. So.
Absolutely, they both did a great job, and it was fun working with them, and I learned an awful lot from both of them. And what can I say? Thank you. Yeah. The town of Breckenridge thanks you for your service.
It's a lot of reading.
Yeah, no. They were excellent town council people. They put the community first and foremost in all of their decision making, I believe. And you couldn't ask for more from council members. They're surely going to be missed. There's some big shoes to fill.
Yep. So we'll welcome the new ones, say goodbye to the old ones, and we'll see you again next month. Thanks for joining us.